In the heart of America's farmland, where golden wheat fields stretch to the horizon, James Miller's story begins with weathered hands and a weary heart. For 15 years, he worked his family's land alone, watching it slowly slip away as debts mounted and hope faded. Then Sarah Wheeler rolled into his life, her wheelchair marking gentle tracks in the dusty paths of his farm. Their courtship blossomed among the failing crops, her smile bringing light to his darkest days. As their wedding day approached, the community gathered to celebrate their union, unaware that Sarah harbored a secret that would change everything. What began as a simple ceremony was about to become a moment that would redefine not just their love, but the very future of the Miller farmstead. What secret had Sarah been keeping from James all these months, and how would it transform their lives forever? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. James Miller stood at the edge of his withering cornfield, the morning sun casting long shadows across rows of struggling stalks. The century-old deed to the Miller farm sat heavily in his overall pocket, its weathered edges a constant reminder of the legacy he was failing to preserve. His calloused fingers traced the cracked soil, remembering his father's words from 15 years ago, spoken from a hospital bed that had been moved into the farmhouse's front room. "This land, son," Robert Miller had whispered, his voice rough as autumn wheat. "It's got the memories of 4 generations in every acre. Your great-grandfather cleared it with nothing but an axe and a dream. Your grandfather survived the dust bowl by sleeping in the barn to hand-water every last seedling. I made it through the farm crisis of the 80s by eating nothing but beans for 2 years straight. Now it's your turn to find a way." Those words echoed in James's mind every morning as he faced the mounting pile of bills on his kitchen table. The latest notice from First State Bank sat unopened, but he knew what it said. The same thing they'd been telling him for the past 3 years. His loan payments were behind, and their patience was wearing thin. At 52, he was watching. His family's heritage slipped through his fingers like the dry soil he could no longer afford to irrigate properly. The old farmhouse creaked behind him, its paint peeling in the relentless Kansas sun. Every loose board and sagging shutter felt like a personal failure. The greenhouse, once his mother's pride and joy, stood empty and cracked, its plastic panels yellowed with age. He'd had to sell the last of their cattle 2 winters ago, and the barn now stored more rust than machinery. Walking back toward the house, James passed the ancient oak tree where his grandmother had once hung a tire swing. The rope was long gone, but he could still see the smooth groove it had worn in the branch above. He paused, leaning against the trunk, remembering summers filled with laughter and the smell of his mother's apple pies cooling on the windowsill. The sound of tires on gravel drew his attention to the driveway. Martha Jenkins from the diner in town was making her weekly delivery of day-old bread and pastries, a kindness she'd started after his father's passing that he'd never found the courage to refuse. She'd been his father's classmate, and her gentle charity was wrapped in enough gossip and small talk to let him maintain his dignity. "James Miller, you're looking thin as a fence post," Martha called out, hefting a paper bag from her car. "I've got some of those biscuits you like, and Emma's coffee cake from yesterday. Still fresh as can be with just a few seconds in the microwave." He managed a smile, taking the bag. "Martha, you're too good to me. Let me at least pay you something this time." She waved him off with a knowing look. "You can pay me by coming into town for lunch today. That diner gets awful quiet around 2, and I've got someone you should meet." James started to decline, but Martha was already heading back to her car. 2 o'clock sharp, James. Don't make me send the sheriff out here to drag you in. Besides," she added with a wink, "I hear the bank's been asking about you. Might do you good to be seen around town, looking presentable and all." After she left, James stood in his driveway, the bag of bread warm against his chest. Martha's words about the bank sent a familiar chill down his spine. He knew what people in town were saying. that it was only a matter of time before the Miller farm joined the growing list of family properties being sold off to corporate agriculture companies. Inside the kitchen, he set the bread aside and finally opened the bank notice. The words blurred together, but the number at the bottom was clear enough. He had 90 days to make good on his payments or face foreclosure proceedings. 3 months to somehow find money he didn't have, to save a legacy he wasn't sure could be saved anymore. He was still staring at the notice when the old mantel clock struck 1. Martha's invitation nagged at him. He couldn't afford to waste. And time in town. But he also couldn't afford to ignore the social machinery of a small farming community. His father had taught him that relationships were sometimes the only thing standing between survival and failure in years when the rain didn't come. James changed into his good shirt, the one without patches, and ran a comb through his graying hair. The mirror showed him a man he sometimes had trouble recognizing, too thin, too worn, the worry lines around his eyes deeper than his father's had been at the same age. But his mother had always said that a Miller man cleaned up decent enough when he tried. The drive into town was barely 5 miles, but it felt like crossing a border into another world. Here the streets were paved, the lawns were green, and people didn't carry the weight of generations on their shoulders. He parked his truck, with its mismatched door and rusted fender, in front of Martha's diner, knowing the whole town would be talking about his appearance within the hour. The bell above the door chimed as he entered, and the familiar smell of coffee and pie wrapped around him like an old friend. Martha stood behind the counter, beaming as if his arrival was the highlight of her day. But it was the woman sitting at the corner table who caught his attention, someone he'd never seen before in a town where strangers were rare as rain in August. She sat in a wheelchair, but it was her smile that struck him first, warm and genuine, with none of the pity he'd grown used to seeing in people's eyes. Martha was already hurrying over, coffee pot in hand, ready to make introductions. And something in the air changed, like the shift in pressure before a summer storm, though James didn't know it yet. That was the moment everything began to change, though it would take him months to understand just how much. Sarah Wheeler had learned long ago that people reveal their true nature in those first few seconds after noticing her wheelchair. Some immediately avert their eyes, others compensate with excessive cheerfulness, and a rare few simply meet her gaze as they would anyone else. James Miller did something entirely different. He looked at her hands first. They were strong hands, tanned and capable, marked by years of desk work rather than field labor. Before her retirement 2 years ago, she'd spent 3 decades as a financial advisor in Chicago, helping family farms navigate the increasingly complex world of agricultural economics. Now, watching James settle awkwardly into the chair across from her, she noticed how he unconsciously mirrored her posture, his own weathered hands folded on the table. "James, this is Sarah Wheeler," Martha announced, pouring coffee with a flourish of a matchmaker. She'd just bought the old Henderson place on County Line Road. "Sarah, James Miller runs the Century Farm out on Route 7. Runs it into the ground, more like," James muttered, then flushed with embarrassment. But Sarah caught the flash of pride beneath his self-deprecation. This was a man who carried his failures as badges of honor rather than marks of shame. She opened the leather-bound journal that never left her side, its pages filled with notes and observations about local properties. "Actually, Mr. Miller, I've been admiring your Southfield rotation pattern. Not many farmers still practice traditional crop succession in this area." The surprise on his face was worth the hours she'd spent studying his farm from the road. "You know about crop rotation? I spent my career helping farmers find innovative solutions to traditional problems," she replied, carefully gauging his reaction. "The Henderson place is my retirement project, though I'll admit I'm better with numbers than nitrogen fixation." For the next hour, their conversation wandered through topics that would have bored anyone else to tears. Soil composition, rainfall patterns, interest rates on agricultural loans. Martha kept their coffee cups full, hiding her satisfied smile behind her order pad. The diner slowly emptied around them, the afternoon sun casting long shadows across the checkerboard floor. Sarah watched James gradually relax, his initial discomfort forgotten, as they discussed the challenges facing small farms in the modern economy. She didn't mention the research he'd already done on his property, the potential she saw in his outdated irrigation system, or the substantial inheritance from her parents that sat untouched in her investment accounts. "The thing is," James was saying, gesturing with his fork, "farming's not just about the work anymore. It's about paperwork and predictions and playing the market. My father could make decisions based on the feel of soil between his fingers. Now we need satellite images and futures contracts." Sarah nodded, making another note in her journal. "The fundamentals haven't changed, though. Good land is still good land. Sometimes it just needs a fresh perspective, and maybe a little. A capital investment to reach its potential." James's face clouded slightly at the mention of capital, and Sarah knew she'd pushed too far, too fast. She changed the subject, asking about the history of his farm, watching him light up as he spoke about his great-grandfather's journey from Scotland, with nothing but farming tools and determination. As afternoon faded toward evening, Martha finally chewed them out, claiming she needed to close early for inventory. In the parking lot, James hesitated by Sarah's adapted van. "Miss Wheeler, Sarah, would you like to see the farm sometime? I mean, if you're interested in local agricultural practices." He trailed off, suddenly uncertain. Sarah smiled, careful to keep her voice casual. "I'd like that very much, and please call me Sarah. Miss Wheeler makes me feel like a school teacher." She watched him drive away in his battered truck, then pulled out her phone. The call connected on the second ring. "Tom? Sarah Wheeler here." "Yes, about that irrigation system we discussed. I think it's time to draw up some preliminary plans. And could you reach out to your brother about greenhouse construction costs?" "No, nothing definite yet. Just exploring possibilities." That evening, Sarah added to her journal, her neat handwriting filling another page. "James Miller carries his family's legacy like Atlas carried the world, not because he was forced to, but because he believes it's his duty. He sees only the present struggle, not the untapped potential of his land. The farm's problems are primarily infrastructural: outdated irrigation, inefficient energy systems, lack of modern storage facilities. All fixable with proper investment. But it's more than that. There's something about him, about the way he speaks of the land with such devotion despite its seemingly inevitable loss. He reminds me of my father in that way. The same quiet strength, the same stubborn dignity, in the face of overwhelming odds. The question isn't whether to help, but how to do it without wounding that dignity. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give a person is the means to save themselves." She closed the journal, wheeling to her window to look out over her own newly purchased land. The Henderson place wasn't much, 20 acres of neglected pasture and a ramshackle house, but it gave her a legitimate reason to be here, to understand this community she'd chosen for her retirement. Or perhaps, she thought, with a smile, the community that had chosen her. The stars were emerging in the Kansas sky, brighter than she'd ever seen them in Chicago. Somewhere out there, James Miller was probably still working, pushing against the tide of time and economics, with nothing but determination and fading hope. Sarah wrapped her hands around her coffee mug, mind already working through possibilities, calculations and plans. She had always believed that money was like water. Its true value lay not in its possession, but in how it could bring life to barren places. And from what she'd seen today, the Miller farm was fertile ground indeed, just waiting for the right kind of rain. Over the next few weeks, Sarah found herself drawing detailed plans of the Miller farm in the evenings, her architect's ruler and graph paper spread across her kitchen table. Each visit revealed new possibilities. The abandoned greenhouse that could be modernized, The north field perfectly situated for solar panels, the spring-fed creek that could support a state-of-the-art irrigation system. But it was the subtle changes in James that fascinated her most. He'd taken to meeting her at the property line when she visited, his truck idling beside her van as they shared coffee from an old thermos. At first, he'd been formal, almost apologetic, about the farm's condition. Gradually, though, his pride in the land began to show through the worn patches. "This soil," he said one morning, crumbling rich black earth between his fingers. "It's been organic since before organic was fashionable. My grandfather never trusted chemical fertilizers, said they were like taking out a loan from the land that you'd have to repay with interest." Sarah wheeled closer, her chair's special tires handling the uneven ground. "He sounds like a wise man. Have you ever considered getting organic certification? There's a growing market for heritage farming methods." "Certification costs money," James replied, but she noticed him glancing thoughtfully at the field. "Though Dad always said we were sitting on gold if we could figure out how to sell it right." Sarah pulled out her ever-present journal, making a note while asking casual questions about his current crop yields. Each piece of information was another puzzle piece, fitting into the plan taking shape in her mind. She'd already spoken with organic certification specialists and calculated the potential return on investment. The numbers were promising, especially when combined with her other ideas. Their conversations began to stretch beyond farming. James told her about his mother's famous apple pies, describing the precise way she'd latticed the crust. Sarah shared stories about growing up in Chicago, making him laugh with tales of her first disastrous attempts at container gardening on her apartment balcony. "I killed 3 tomato plants and a supposedly unkillable cactus," she admitted, watching. His eyes crinkled with amusement. "That's when I decided my talents lay in helping farmers with their books rather than their crops." "Speaking of books," James said hesitantly, "I've been meaning to ask your advice about something." He pulled a wrinkled envelope from his pocket, another notice from the bank. Sarah kept her expression neutral as she reviewed the numbers, though inside her heart ached at the impossible position he was in. "Have you considered diversification?" she asked carefully. "Your land has excellent potential for agritourism. People pay good money these days to experience authentic farm life." James looked skeptical, but she could see him running the numbers in his head. "City folks wanting to play farmer? Don't know if I'm up for that kind of thing." "Just think about it," Sarah suggested, adding another note to her journal. She didn't mention that she'd already researched successful agritourism operations in similar communities, or that she had drafted preliminary renovation plans for converting the old barn into an event space. Their meetings became more frequent, and Sarah found herself sharing things she'd never told anyone else. About the car accident that put her in the wheelchair 15 years ago, about her parents' unwavering support and the inheritance they'd left her, meant to ensure she'd always be independent. "They taught me that wheelchair or no wheelchair, it's what you do with your resources that matters," she told him one evening as they watched the sunset paint the wheat fields gold. "Money, ability, knowledge, they're all just tools. It's how you use them to help others that counts." James was quiet for a long moment, looking at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "You're something else, Sarah Wheeler," he finally said. "You've got a way of making possibilities seem real." She smiled, fighting the urge to tell him about all the possibilities she saw for his farm, for their future. Instead, she pointed to a hawk circling lazily overhead. "Red-tailed hawk. Your father used to say they were good luck, didn't he?" "How did you know that?" "You mentioned it once, weeks ago." "I pay attention to the important things, James." The way he looked at her then made her breath catch, and she knew her carefully laid plans were becoming entangled with something deeper, something that had nothing to do with business strategies or agricultural innovations. That night, she made 2 phone calls. The first was to her investment manager, initiating the process of liquidating certain assets. The second was to Martha at the diner. "Make sure you get everyone there for Sunday dinner," she instructed. I think it's time we move things along. Martha's delighted laugh crackled through the phone. About time. I was wondering how long you two would dance around each other. You know he's been asking about your favorite flowers. Sarah glanced at her latest set of farm renovation plans, feeling a moment of doubt. Martha, do you think he'll understand why I kept all this secret? Why I didn't just offer to help outright? Honey, Martha's voice softened. That man has had more well-meaning folks try to help him over the years than you can count. But you're the first one who saw what he needed most. A partner, not a savior. Trust your heart on this one. After hanging up, Sarah wheeled to her window, looking out toward the Miller farm. The lights were still on in his kitchen. He'd be up late doing paperwork, she knew. Soon, if everything went according to plan, those evening hours would be spent on more promising tasks than counting mounting debts. She opened her journal one last time that night, adding a final note. Sometimes love grows like a crop, slowly, steadily, requiring patience and faith in equal measure. And sometimes, like the best harvests, it yields more than anyone could have predicted. Sarah sat in her study, surrounded by papers and blueprints, her laptop displaying a substantial bank statement that would have shocked most of her neighbors. The inheritance from her parents had grown significantly under her careful management. And now it was time to put it to use. She'd spent the morning on conference calls with agricultural experts, contractors, and sustainable farming consultants. Miss Wheeler, her longtime financial advisor, had warned, "This is a significant portion of your portfolio we're talking about. Are you certain you want to invest it all in someone else's property?" She'd smiled, remembering James's face as he'd shown her his great-grandfather's handwritten farm journal the day before. "I'm not investing in property, Richard. I'm investing in a future." A knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. Tom Anderson, the local contractor she'd hired, entered with a thick folder of estimates and timelines. "Sarah, we've got the preliminary numbers for the irrigation system and greenhouse renovation. But there's something you should know. We can't keep this quiet much longer. Small town like this, people talk." "They certainly do," Sarah agreed, wheeling over to her filing cabinet. "That's exactly what I'm counting on." She pulled out a carefully prepared document, her marriage license application. "We just need to time everything perfectly." Tom's weathered face broke into a grin as understanding dawned. "Well, I'll be. You're not just saving the farm. You're becoming part of it." "That's the plan," Sarah said softly. "Though sometimes I wonder if I'm doing this all backwards. Most people get married first, then make plans for their future together." "Most people aren't you, Sarah. And from what I've seen of James Miller these past few weeks, he's not most people either." She thought about the changes she'd observed in James since they'd begun spending time together. The way he stood straighter, spoke more confidently about his plans for the farm. He'd even started clearing out the old greenhouse, though he claimed it was just to prevent it from becoming a hazard. Later that afternoon, Sarah made her way to Martha's diner for their daily coffee meeting. James was already there, deep in conversation with Bill Thompson, the local feed store owner. She caught fragments of their discussion, something about organic feed options and certification requirements. "Sarah," James's face lit up as he noticed her, and her heart did that familiar flip. "I was just asking Bill about some of those ideas you mentioned. Turns out there might be a market for organic beef after all." Martha appeared with Sarah's usual coffee order, exchanging a knowing look with her. "James here's been full of new ideas lately," she commented. "Wonder where he's getting his inspiration from." James ducked his head, a slight blush creeping up his neck. "Just trying to think ahead for a change, instead of always playing catch-up." Sarah opened her journal, hiding her smile. Inside, alongside her farm renovation notes, was a detailed timeline for the next 3 months. The bank's deadline loomed at the end, but her plans would come to fruition well before then, assuming everything went as scheduled. "Actually," James said, clearing his throat, "I was hoping we could have dinner tomorrow night, at the farm." I know it's not much, but I thought maybe— I'd love to, Sarah interrupted, her heart racing. This was it, the moment she'd been waiting for. What time should I come? 6. I thought we could watch the sunset from the back porch. Weather's supposed to be nice. Martha practically bounced behind the counter, and Sarah knew the entire town would know about their dinner plans within the hour. That was fine. It would make the wedding announcement seem all the more natural when the time came. After James left for his afternoon chores, Sarah sat quietly, running her fingers over the edges of her journal. Inside was every detail of her plan to save the Miller farm. Irrigation systems, organic certification paperwork, greenhouse modernization plans, solar panel installations. But more importantly, it contained her hopes for their future together. She'd fallen in love not just with James, but with his dedication to the land, his quiet strength, his unwavering sense of responsibility. Every time he spoke about his family's legacy, she saw the man she wanted to build a life with. You know, Martha said, sliding into the booth across from her, I haven't seen him smile like that since before his father passed. Whatever you're planning, Sarah Wheeler, it's already working. Sarah closed her journal, touching its worn cover thoughtfully. I just hope he understands why I did it this way, why I couldn't simply offer to help outright. Because you're smart enough to know that a proud man needs to feel like he's standing on his own 2 feet, Martha replied. And because some gifts are better given through love than charity. That evening, Sarah wheeled around her property, looking toward the Miller farm in the distance. The setting sun caught the broken windows of the old greenhouse, making them glitter like promises waiting to be kept. Tomorrow she would have dinner with the man she loved. Soon after, she hoped, she would help him rebuild not just his farm, but his faith in the future. Her phone buzzed, another text from the contractor about delivery schedules and worker availability. Everything was falling into place, piece by piece. She typed a quick response, then sat back, watching the stars emerge above the wheat fields. Your daughter's got plans, Dad, she whispered to the evening air. Big ones. I think you and Mom would approve. Word of James and Sarah's engagement spread through the town like wildfire after their dinner on the back porch. The proposal itself had been simple. James kneeling beside her wheelchair as the sun set behind them, offering not just a ring, but a promise to face whatever came next together. Sarah's yes had been immediate, her heart too full for anything but certainty. Now, 3 weeks later, Martha's diner had become unofficial wedding planning headquarters. The long table in the back corner was covered with fabric swatches, flour, catalogues, and guest lists written in Martha's flowing handwriting. The whole town had embraced the upcoming celebration as if it were a communal project. The Miller-Wheeler wedding, Martha announced one morning, serving coffee to the planning committee, is going to be the event of the decade. Emma's already started experimenting with wedding cake recipes, and the Henderson boys have offered to mow the entire farm field for the outdoor ceremony. Sarah sat at the table, watching the enthusiastic planning with a mixture of joy and anxiety. Her secret plans for the farm's renovation were becoming harder to keep as the wedding preparations advanced. Just yesterday, she'd had to make an excuse when James noticed a surveyor's truck parked near their property line. I was thinking, James said, joining them at the table during his lunch break, work-worn hands oddly gentle as he sorted through invitation samples. Maybe we could have the ceremony in front of the old greenhouse. I know it's not much to look at now, but that's where my parents got married. Sarah exchanged a quick glance with Martha, her heart racing. The greenhouse was central to her renovation plans. By wedding day, it would be transformed into a state-of-the-art facility. That sounds perfect, she managed, squeezing his hand. Though maybe we should wait to decide until closer to the date. You never know what might change between now and then. The local school children had taken it upon themselves to create handmade wedding invitations, each one decorated with carefully drawn wheat stalks and farm scenes. Miss Thompson, the art teacher, brought a stack to show them, each envelope addressed in wobbly but earnest handwriting. The kids insisted, she explained, watching Sarah blink back tears at the thoughtful gesture. "They say Miss Wheeler and Mr. Miller are like a fairy tale come true." James cleared his throat, clearly moved. "Well, they've got that right about Sarah, at least. Still not sure what a fairy tale princess sees in an old farmer like me." "James Miller," Sarah said firmly, "you're worth more than all the princes in all the fairy tales. You just don't know it yet." The wedding date was set for early autumn, when the wheat fields would be golden and the weather mild. Sarah had carefully timed it to coincide with the completion of her secret renovations. The workers had been sworn to silence, their unusual schedules explained away as part of other projects in the area. The community's involvement grew daily. The quilting circle was creating a wedding blanket, each square representing a local family's connection to the Miller farm. The high school band offered to provide music for the reception. Even the bank president, who'd been pressing James about his loans, seemed to soften, granting a small extension that aligned perfectly with Sarah's timeline. "It's like the whole town is conspiring to give them a perfect day," Martha confided to her regular customers. "Though if you ask me, those two deserve nothing less." One evening, as they sat on James's porch swing after another planning session, Sarah found herself studying his profile in the fading light. He looked younger somehow, the worry lines around his eyes less pronounced. His hand found hers, fingers intertwining naturally. "You've changed everything, you know," he said quietly. "Not just for me, but for the whole farm. It's like having hope is finally allowed again." Sarah's throat tightened. If only he knew how much change was really coming. "Tell me about your dreams for this place," she said instead. "If anything was possible, what would you want to see happen here?" James was quiet for a long moment, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. "Honestly, I dream about making it sustainable again. Modern greenhouses for year-round growing, better irrigation, maybe even those solar panels you mentioned. A place where the next generation could actually make a living, not just survive." Sarah pressed closer to him, her heart pounding. Everything he described was already in motion, hidden in plain sight behind wedding preparations and community excitement. "Those sound like wonderful dreams," she whispered. Later that night, alone in her study, Sarah reviewed the latest progress reports from her contractors. The greenhouse renovation was ahead of schedule. The irrigation system components were being delivered under cover of darkness, and the solar installation team was ready to move in the week before the wedding. She opened her journal to a fresh page and wrote, "Sometimes the greatest gifts are the ones we get to give in secret, watching joy unfold without taking credit. In 3 weeks, James will know everything. I pray he'll understand that this isn't about rescuing him. It's about giving him the tools to rescue his own dreams." A knock at her door revealed Martha, bearing a plate of fresh cookies and a knowing smile. "Thought you might need a snack while you're working on all your wedding preparations," she said, making air quotes with her fingers. "Martha," Sarah began, but the older woman waved her off. "Don't worry, honey. Your secret's safe with everyone who needs to know. We're all just happy to be part of the miracle you're creating. Though I have to say, watching you juggle actual wedding plans with your other project is better than any television show I've ever seen." With 2 weeks until the wedding, Sarah's carefully orchestrated dance of secrets was becoming increasingly complex. The contractors worked at night, their lights carefully shielded from view of the main farmhouse. During the day, wedding preparations provided perfect cover for unusual deliveries and mysterious meetings. "The tent company needs to survey the field," she'd explain, when James noticed unfamiliar trucks, or "the caterers are checking the barn's power supply." Each excuse was plausible enough, especially with the entire town seemingly involved in wedding preparations. Tom Anderson, her lead contractor, had developed an elaborate system of text messages to coordinate the work. Green light meant James was away from the farm. Red light meant he was heading back unexpectedly. The workers had become experts at disappearing into the landscape at a moment's notice. "You should have been a military strategist," Tom joked. One night, showing her the latest progress on the greenhouse renovation. The ancient structure had been completely gutted, its skeleton now housing state-of-the-art hydroponic systems and climate controls. "I've never seen an operation run this tight." Sarah wheeled through the greenhouse, checking each detail against her plans. "Everything has to be perfect," she insisted. "This isn't just about surprising him. It's about giving him a fighting chance to save his heritage." The irrigation system was nearly complete, its pipes buried deep enough to avoid detection during regular farm work. Solar panels lay carefully hidden under tarps in the old barn, ready for installation in the final days before the wedding. Each piece of the puzzle had been meticulously planned and timed. During the day, Sarah threw herself into traditional wedding preparations with equal dedication. She'd chosen a dress that complemented her wheelchair, worked with a local seamstress to make subtle adaptations that would allow her to move gracefully during the ceremony. The alterations appointments provided perfect cover for meetings with agricultural consultants and equipment suppliers. James, meanwhile, seemed to be working through his own transformation. She caught him studying modern farming magazines, making notes about organic certification requirements, even sketching rough plans for future improvements. It was as if her presence had awakened something in him, a cautious hope for the future. "I've been thinking," he said one evening as they reviewed seating arrangements in Martha's diner. "Maybe after the wedding, we could look into some of those modernization ideas you mentioned. Start small, you know? Maybe fix up the greenhouse." "First," Sarah's heart skipped a beat, but she kept her voice steady. "That sounds wonderful. Though you never know. Sometimes good things happen faster than we expect." Martha, wiping down nearby tables, nearly dropped her dishcloth, trying to hide her knowing smile. The community's involvement grew more touching by the day. The local quilting circle had finished their wedding gift, a masterpiece featuring panels depicting the farm's history, from the original homestead to the present day. Sarah had secretly commissioned an additional panel showing the farm's future. Modern greenhouses, solar arrays, and thriving fields. "We'll add it after the wedding," the quilting circle president whispered during a clandestine meeting. "Once everything's revealed." The high school shop class, under the guise of building wedding arch decorations, had actually constructed specialized equipment racks for the new greenhouse. The FFA chapter's wedding gift of heritage seed varieties was carefully coordinated with Sarah's organic farming plans. Even the bank president had become an unlikely ally. "Take whatever time you need with the loan paperwork, James," he'd said with a cryptic smile. "Something tells me things are going to work out just fine." One afternoon, Sarah found James standing in front of the old greenhouse, his expression thoughtful. Her heart nearly stopped until she realized he was looking at wedding decoration, plans, not the subtle changes already taking place inside. "My mother would have loved you," he said suddenly. "She always said this farm needed a woman's touch, someone with vision and heart." He turned to her, his eyes suspiciously bright. "I just wish I had more to offer you than a struggling farm and a mountain of debt." Sarah reached for his hand, fighting back tears. "James Miller, you've given me everything I never knew I was looking for. Trust me when I say our future is brighter than you think." That evening, after James had gone to bed, Sarah met with her team one last time before the final push. The renovation plans were spread across portable tables in the barn, illuminated by battery-powered lanterns. "Everything's on schedule," Tom reported. "Irrigation's done, greenhouse is nearly complete, solar installation starts tomorrow night. Your timing with the wedding is perfect. We'll have just enough time to put on the finishing touches while everyone's at the rehearsal dinner." Sarah studied the plans, her finger tracing the familiar lines. "And the organic certification?" "Paperwork, all prepared," her agricultural consultant confirmed. "Once the new systems are operational, you'll qualify for expedited processing. The soil samples already meet all requirements. James's traditional farming methods actually worked in our favor there." And the surprise itself? Everything's arranged for the ceremony. Martha, who had joined them for the final planning session, squeezed her shoulder. Don't you worry about that part. The whole town knows their cues. This is going to be better than any reality TV show reveal. Later, alone in her study, Sarah opened her journal one last time before the final preparations began. She wrote, "In 1 week, everything changes, not just for James and the farm, but for me too. I've spent my life helping farmers through spreadsheets and financial plans. But this is different. This is about love, hope, and the kind of magic that happens when an entire community comes together to help dreams come true." She paused, then added, "Mom, Dad, I hope you're watching. Your little girl is about to pull off the biggest surprise of her life. And I think you'd be proud of how I'm using your gift to create something wonderful." The evening before the wedding, the Miller farm hummed with activity. Strings of lights twinkled in the trees, their glow catching the edges of the renovated greenhouse, now cleverly disguised under what appeared to be decorative wedding draping. Workers moved with practiced stealth, putting final touches on Sarah's grand surprise, while wedding preparations provided perfect cover. James stood on his back porch, surveying the transformation of his family's land into a wedding venue. "It's like a fairy tale out here," he murmured as Sarah wheeled up beside him, "though I keep feeling like I'm missing something. People seem to be everywhere, doing things I can't quite catch." Sarah squeezed his hand, her heart racing. "That's what happens when an entire town decides to help with a wedding. Speaking of which, aren't you supposed to be heading to Tom's house soon? Bad luck to see the bride before the ceremony, you know. Since when are you superstitious?" James laughed, but she could hear the emotion in his voice. "It's just, Sarah, I need to say something before tomorrow. About the farm. About our future." "James Miller, if you're about to apologize one more time for the farm's condition, I swear I'll run over your toes with my wheelchair." He chuckled, kneeling beside her chair. "No, it's not that. Well, not exactly. It's just something's different lately. The way people talk about the farm, the way they look at me in town. It's like they know something I don't. Even the bank. President winked at me yesterday. Actually winked." Sarah kept her expression neutral, though her pulse quickened. "Maybe they just see what I see, a good man who deserves some happiness. Or maybe my future wife is up to something." His tone was teasing, but there was a hint of curiosity in his eyes that made her breath catch. "Martha's been practically bouncing every time she sees me, and Tom Anderson's trucks keep showing up at odd hours." "James," Sarah said firmly, turning her chair to face him, "do you trust me?" "With everything I am." "Then trust that tomorrow will be perfect, in ways you can't imagine right now. And trust that everything I've done, everything I'm doing is because I love you and this farm and the life we're going to build together." He studied her face for a long moment, then smiled. "You know, for someone who claims she's bad at farming, you're awful good at planting seeds of curiosity." Sarah laughed, relieved. "Go on, get out of here. You've got a big day tomorrow, and Martha will have my head if you're late for your own bachelor dinner." After James left, Sarah rolled through the darkening farm, checking every detail one final time. The renovated greenhouse systems hummed quietly behind their temporary walls. The new irrigation control panel waited under its top, ready to be unveiled. Solar panels gleamed faintly in the barn, prepared for their morning installation. Martha found her by the old oak tree, staring at the transformed property. "Everything's ready," she reported. "The workers know their cues, the guests know their parts, and Emma's wedding cake is a masterpiece that would make those TV show bakers weep." "What if he's angry?" Sarah whispered, voicing her deepest fear. "What if he sees this as me going behind his back, making decisions about his farm without him?" Martha settled onto a nearby bench. "Honey, that man has loved this land his whole life, but he's been loving it with his hands tied behind his back. You're not taking over. You're setting him free to be the farmer he always wanted to be. Besides," she added with a grin, "I've known James Miller since he was knee-high to a grasshopper. The only thing that might make him mad is if you'd let his family's legacy slip away when you had the power to save it." Sarah opened her journal one last time under the string lights. The page was worn from constant reference. Her minute-by-minute timeline for tomorrow's revelation. Each moment was choreographed, from the morning preparations to the final unveiling during the ceremony. Tom appeared, his flashlight beam carefully directed downward. Final systems check is complete. Everything's operational and ready for the big reveal. The team will be back at dawn to handle the last installations. And the weather? Sarah asked, though she'd checked the forecast hourly. Clear skies predicted, just like you arranged, Martha teased, though I wouldn't put it past you to have a backup plan for rain. Sarah smiled, patting the waterproof tarps folded neatly in her wheelchair's side pocket. A good fairy godmother always comes prepared. Later, in the quiet of her own home, Sarah laid out her wedding dress, carefully altered to complement her wheelchair while allowing freedom of movement for tomorrow's reveals. Her mother's pearls waited in their velvet box, and beside them, a small album of photographs. She opened it, touching the images gently, her parents at their own wedding, young and full of dreams, her father teaching her to read financial statements at the kitchen table, her mother's fierce determination after Sarah's accident, remodeling their entire house for wheelchair accessibility. I learned from the best, she whispered to their smiling faces. You taught me that love isn't just about feelings. It's about action, about seeing what needs to be done and finding a way to do it. A text from James lit up her phone. Can't sleep. Keep thinking about tomorrow, about you, about everything. Thank you for choosing me. Sarah typed back, get some rest, farmer. Tomorrow's going to be a day you'll never forget. She closed the photo album, setting it beside her wedding dress. Outside, the lights on the Miller farm twinkled like earthbound stars, illuminating a property poised on the edge of transformation. In less than 12 hours, everything would change. Sarah wheeled to her window one last time, watching the distant glow. Tomorrow, she would become Mrs. Miller. But more importantly, tomorrow she would give James the greatest gift she could. Imagine the means to save his family's legacy and build their future together. Dawn broke over the Miller farm in streaks of pink and gold, finding Sarah already awake and alert in her childhood bedroom at Martha's house. She'd barely slept, her mind running through the intricate choreography of the day ahead. From her window, she could see workers moving like shadows across the farm property, making final preparations under the cover of early morning mist. Everything's on schedule, Martha announced, bringing in coffee and fresh cinnamon rolls. Tom's crew finished the solar installation at 4 a.m. The new irrigation system had its final test at 5, and James, she grinned, still sound asleep at his sister's house in town, completely unaware that his farm is transforming before his eyes. Sarah wheeled to her vanity, where her wedding dress hung like a promise. Any word from the organic certification inspector? Arrived last night, did the preliminary walkthrough at dawn. Says everything exceeds specifications. The paperwork will be ready for the reveal, just like you planned. The morning unfolded like a well-rehearsed dance. Sarah's hair and makeup artist arrived, carefully creating a look that would complement both her natural beauty and the wheelchair she decorated with subtle white flowers and ribbons. Martha coordinated a steady stream of text messages from various team members, each reporting their piece of the grand plan falling into place. Greenhouse systems all green, came Tom's update. Solar panels calibrated and running, followed. Another. Irrigation control center ready for demonstration, reported a third. Sarah opened her journal one last time, reviewing the timeline she knew by heart. The ceremony would begin at 11, timed perfectly with the sun's position to highlight. The renovated greenhouse. The reveal would come during the vows, when she would present James not just with a ring, but with the key to their future. Sarah, Martha called softly from the doorway. There's someone here to see you. Bill Thompson, the bank president, stepped into the room holding a leather portfolio. I hope I'm not intruding, but I wanted to deliver this personally. He handed Sarah a document, the official release of all liens against the Miller farm. "Consider it my wedding gift. Once James sees what you've done with the place, he'll have no trouble securing new financing on much better terms." Sarah blinked back tears, adding the document to her collection of reveals. "Thank you, Bill, for everything, especially for keeping our secret." "Are you kidding? My wife would have killed me if I'd spoiled the best surprise this town's seen in 50 years. As the morning progressed, Sarah's phone buzzed with a text from James. "Missing you. The farm looks strange from my sister's window, like it belongs in someone else's life. Can't wait to start our future there together." If he only knew, Sarah thought, how different that future would be from anything he imagined. She typed back, "Just a few more hours, farmer. I love you." At 10 o'clock, Martha helped Sarah into her wedding dress, its specially designed cuts and folds, making it look elegant with her wheelchair rather than simply adapted to it. Her mother's pearls settled cool against her throat, and her bouquet, wheat stalks mixed with wildflowers, rested in her lap. "Sarah Wheeler," Martha said, stepping back to admire her handiwork, "you are about to make history in this town, and not just because you're giving us the most talked-about wedding since the Henderson twins married those rodeo cowboys in '85. Through the window, Sarah could see guests beginning to arrive, their cars kicking up dust along the farm road. The renovated greenhouse gleamed in the morning sun, its temporary covering catching the light like dewdrops. Workers moved with practiced efficiency, completing final preparations while appearing to simply be setting up for the ceremony. Tom's last text arrived. "All systems go, team in position, Operation Wedding Surprise is ready for launch." Sarah took a deep breath, touching the folder hidden in her wheelchair's side compartment. Inside were the documents that would change everything. Organic certification papers, solar system specifications, irrigation plans, and most importantly, the deed to the farm with both their names on it. A commotion outside drew her attention. Through the window, she could see James arriving at his sister's house across town, looking handsome in his new suit but clearly nervous. Even from a distance, she could see him glancing repeatedly toward the farm, as if trying to solve a puzzle just out of reach. "He suspects something," Martha observed, adjusting Sarah's veil. "But trust me, honey, he hasn't got a clue just how big this surprise is going to be." Sarah smiled, remembering all the little moments that had led to this day. The careful questions about farm operations, the subtle suggestions about modern techniques, the groundwork laid so patiently for the changes to come. "I just hope he understands why I did it this way. That man has spent his whole life putting everyone else first. The farm, his family's legacy, the community's expectations. Today, someone's finally putting him first." Martha dabbed at her eyes with her apron. "Now let me go check on the final preparations before I ruin my makeup completely." Left alone, Sarah wheeled to the window one last time. The farm spread out before her like a canvas about to reveal its hidden painting. Soon, the temporary coverings would fall away, showing the gleaming new greenhouse in all its glory. The solar panels would catch the midday sun, and the irrigation system would demonstrate its precision with a choreographed display. But more than the physical transformations, Sarah thought about the changes this day would bring to their lives. The pride she'd see in James's eyes when he realized his family's legacy wasn't just saved, but renewed. The joy of building their future together on this land that meant so much to both of them. "Almost time," Martha called from the hallway. "You ready to change some lives?" Sarah touched her mother's pearls, straightened her shoulders and smiled. "I've been ready since the day I met him." The Miller farm had never seen such a gathering. Cars lined the gravel drive and spilled onto the adjacent field, their dusty parade a testament to how many lives James and Sarah had touched. Guests found their seats beneath the autumn sky, the carefully arranged chairs facing the old greenhouse where so much secret work had been done. From her preparation room in the farmhouse, Sarah could hear the growing murmur of conversation. the excited whispers of those who knew what was coming, mixed with the curious questions of those who didn't. Her hands smoothed the documents in her lap one final time, each paper a piece of the miracle she was about to unveil. Martha burst in, her face flushed with excitement. "You won't believe what James just did," she announced, closing the door behind her. "He walked the entire property line this morning, checking every fence post and gate. Says something feels different about his land today, but he can't put his finger on what's changed." "Did he notice anything?" Sarah asked, her heart racing. "Not a thing. Tom's team did their work well. Everything's hidden in plain sight, just waiting for your signal." Martha adjusted Sarah's veil with trembling hands. "Though I thought we were done for when he went near the new irrigation control panel. Thank goodness for Bill Thompson's quick thinking." "What happened?" Bill started telling him this long story about his cousin's wedding in Texas, practically dragged him away from that top. "I swear, this town deserves an Oscar for the performance we've been putting on." Through the window, Sarah watched more guests arriving. The Henderson family, whose equipment had been crucial in installing the solar panels under cover of darkness. The Anderson sisters, who had helped coordinate the organic certification paperwork. Even old Mr. Peterson, who hadn't left his farm in 5 years, had come to witness what everyone was calling the miracle at Miller Farm. 10 minutes, Martha announced, checking her phone. "Tom says all systems are ready for the demonstration. The greenhouse controls are programmed, irrigation is set, and the solar display will activate on your signal." She paused, dabbing at her eyes. "Sarah Wheeler, you're about to give this town something they'll talk about for generations." A knock at the door revealed Emma from the diner, clutching her apron nervously. "Just saw James," she reported. "He's asking questions about all the extra cars, worried that more people came than we have seats for." She grinned. "Little does he know we planned seating for the biggest crowd this farm's seen since his great-grandfather's barn raising in 1932. Sarah wheeled to the full-length mirror, making one final check of her appearance. The wedding dress flowed perfectly. Around her wheelchair, which had been transformed with delicate decorations that complemented rather than concealed its presence in her life. Just like her plans for the farm, she thought, not hiding its challenges, but transforming them into strengths. "Martha," she said suddenly, "what if he's angry? What if he sees this as me not trusting him to save his own farm?" "Oh, honey." Martha knelt beside her chair. "That man has spent months watching you love this land as much as he does. Every question you asked, every suggestion you made, he saw someone who cared enough to understand what this place means to him. Trust me, the only thing he'll be angry about is not being able to kiss you until the preacher gives permission." Another knock, this time Tom Anderson, looking uncharacteristically elegant in a suit. "Final check complete," he reported. "All systems are operating perfectly. The demonstration will begin on your signal during the vows. And Sarah," he smiled, "what you've done here, it's more than just saving a farm. You're showing everyone in this community what's possible when someone cares enough to make a miracle happen." A commotion outside drew their attention. James had arrived at the ceremony site, handsome in his dark suit, his face a mix of emotion as he took in the transformed setting. Sarah watched through the window as he moved through the crowd, shaking hands, accepting congratulations, his eyes repeatedly drawn to the draped greenhouse where they would exchange their vows. "He keeps touching his pocket," Martha observed, "probably checking for the ring for the 100th time. If he only knew that wasn't the most important thing he'd be receiving today." The wedding coordinator appeared, clipboard in hand. "It's time to get into position. Everyone knows their cues?" Sarah nodded, her heart pounding with anticipation. The folder of documents sat securely in her wheelchair's hidden compartment. The signals had been arranged, the demonstrations programmed. Years of financial expertise, months of secret preparations, and the combined efforts of an entire community were about to culminate in one perfect moment. "Wait," she said, reaching for her journal one last time. On a blank page she wrote, "James Miller, today I give you more than my heart and hand in marriage. I give you the means to be the farmer you've always dreamed of being. Everything I've done has been an act of love. For you, for this land, and for the future we'll build together." Martha read over her shoulder, squeezing her hand. "Come, Aunt Fairy Godmother, it's time to make some dreams come true." As they moved into position, Sarah could hear the string quartet beginning to play. Through the farmhouse window, she caught one last glimpse of James, standing tall beside the disguised greenhouse, his face turned toward the morning sun. In a few moments everything would change, not just for him, but for the entire community that had come together to help love work its miracle on the Miller farm. The morning sun caught the edges of the greenhouse's mysterious draping as James took his place beside Pastor Roberts. The assembled guests settled into their seats, a sea of familiar faces, all wearing expressions that seemed to hold back secrets. Even the pastor appeared to be fighting a knowing smile. The string quartet began the processional, and James turned toward the farmhouse entrance. His breath caught at the sight of Sarah emerging, radiant in her wedding dress, her wheelchair, decorated so elegantly it seemed more like a throne. Martha walked beside her, not pushing the chair, but simply accompanying her friend down the carefully constructed aisle. Sarah's progress toward him was graceful and deliberate, her wheels moving surely over the ground his family had worked for generations. As she approached, James noticed something different in her eyes. Not just love or joy, but a hint of anticipation that made his heart beat faster. "Dearly beloved," Pastor Roberts began once Sarah reached the front, "we are gathered here today not just to witness a marriage, but to celebrate a union of hearts, lives, and dreams." He paused, his eyes twinkling. "And sometimes, dreams have a way of coming true in ways we never expected." James couldn't shake the feeling that everyone present was holding their breath, waiting for something more than just the exchange of rings. Sarah's hands trembled slightly in his as they turned to face each other, but her smile was steady and sure. "Before we proceed with the traditional vows," the pastor continued, "Sarah has asked to share something special with James." He stepped back, and James noticed Martha and Tom Anderson moving to positions on either side of the greenhouse. Sarah squeezed his hands. "James Miller," she began, her voice clear and strong. 15 years ago you promised your father you would find a way to save this farm. Today I'm going to help you keep that promise." She reached into her wheelchair's compartment and withdrew a folder. "Your father taught you that farming isn't just about the land, it's about community. About helping each other, about finding ways to make miracles happen when all hope seems lost." A murmur of excitement rippled through the crowd. James looked from Sarah to the folder, his heart pounding. "Sarah, what?" "For months," she continued, "while we planned our wedding, something else was happening on this farm. Something that your entire community helped create." She nodded to Martha, who stepped forward with what looked like a remote control. "Your great-grandfather built this farm with nothing but determination and dreams," Sarah said. "Your grandfather sustained it through the Dust Bowl with innovation and grit. Your father modernized it for a new era, and now—" She pressed a button on the remote. The mysterious draping around the greenhouse began to fall away, revealing gleaming glass and steel beneath. Solar panels emerged from behind cleverly designed panels on the barn roof. The sound of modern irrigation systems humming to life filled the air. "Now," Sarah said softly, "it's your turn to lead this farm into the future, but you don't have to do it alone anymore." James stared in wonder as the transformed greenhouse came fully into view. Through its crystal-clear panels, he could see state-of-the-art hydroponic systems, climate controls, and automated feeding mechanisms. The solar panels glinted in the sunlight, already feeding power into the new systems. "I don't understand," he whispered, though the truth was beginning to dawn in his eyes. "How did you—" Sarah opened the folder, revealing documents he'd only dreamed of seeing. Organic certification papers, solar energy grants, irrigation permits, and most importantly, a deed with both their names on it, marked "Paid in Full." "Remember all those," Questions I asked about the farm, the time I spent learning about your dreams for this place. She smiled through tears. I wasn't just being curious, I was planning, learning, finding ways to make those dreams come true. The assembled guests were openly crying now, watching as understanding transformed James's face. Tom Anderson stepped forward, holding a tablet displaying real-time data from the new systems. Everything's fully operational, James. The greenhouse can run year-round. The solar array will cut your energy costs by 80%. The irrigation system— He stopped, grinning. Well, maybe we should let Sarah explain the rest. But James wasn't looking at the tablet. He was staring at Sarah with a mixture of awe, love, and dawning comprehension. All those mysterious meetings, the trucks at odd hours, the way everyone in town seemed to be keeping a secret. An entire community came together to help make this happen, Sarah said, because that's what farming communities do. They help dreams come true. They believe in miracles. And sometimes, she touched his cheek gently, they help love find a way to save what matters most. Pastor Roberts cleared his throat, though his own eyes were suspiciously moist. I believe, he said with a smile, this would be an appropriate time for those vows we came here to witness, though I dare say Sarah's already demonstrated the for better or worse part rather spectacularly. Laughter rippled through the crowd, breaking the emotional tension. James took Sarah's hands again, and she could feel them trembling, but his voice was sure and strong as he began the vows they'd written together, words that now held even deeper, meaning, I, James Miller, take you, Sarah Wheeler, to be my wife, to share my life and my dreams, to work beside me in these fields, to build our future on this land that has been my family's heritage and will now be our legacy together. The ceremony continued, but James couldn't take his eyes off Sarah, seeing her in a new light with every passing moment. She hadn't just joined his life, she'd transformed it, finding ways to preserve his family's heritage while building a bridge to the future. And all around them, the Miller farm hummed with new life, its modernized systems a testament to what love could accomplish when mixed with determination, community support, and just a touch of carefully planned miracle-making. As the final words of their vows echoed across the transformed farmland, Tom Anderson stepped forward again, tablet in hand. James, Sarah wanted you to understand exactly what she's created here. Would you like to see the full scope of the changes? James nodded, still clutching Sarah's hand, as though he might wake from a dream if he let go. The wedding guests rose from their seats, forming a path that led around the property. Martha appeared with a champagne flute full of sparkling cider, pressing it into Sarah's free hand with a wink. First, Tom said, leading them toward the greenhouse, you should know that every change was designed to preserve the farm's heritage, while modernizing its capabilities. He pressed a button, and the greenhouse doors slid open silently on automated tracks. Inside, the air was perfectly conditioned, filled with the soft hum of state-of-the-art hydroponic systems, vertical growing. Towers stretched toward the ceiling, already planted with seedlings that would provide year-round produce. Climate control panels glowed softly along the walls, monitoring every aspect of the growing environment. Your mother's greenhouse, Sarah explained softly, reimagined for the next generation. The system can produce as much in this space as 10 acres of traditional farming, using only a fraction of the water. James touched one of the growing towers, his farmer's hands gentle against the modern equipment. This is why you asked so many questions about what Mom used to grow here, and why I wanted to know your favorite crops. Sarah smiled. Each tower is already programmed with optimal growing conditions for everything from tomatoes to herbs. The first harvest should be ready just after we return from our honeymoon. They moved outside, where Tom directed their attention to the barn roof. The solar array will generate enough power for the entire farm, with excess feeding back into the grid for credit. Combined with the new energy-efficient systems, your utility bills should drop to almost nothing. Bill Thompson stepped forward, holding up another document, which is why the bank was happy to approve the new terms on your loan. Between the increased production capacity and reduced operating costs, the farm's economic outlook has completely transformed. Sarah watched as James took in each revelation, his expression shifting between amazement and deepening understanding. The irrigation system, she continued, gesturing to a nearby control panel, is designed to work with both the greenhouse and traditional field farming. It uses weather monitoring and soil moisture sensors to provide precisely what each crop needs. As if on cue, a series of gentle sprayers activated in the distance, demonstrating the precision of the new system. The assembled guests applauded, many wiping away tears as they watched James witness the resurrection of his family's legacy. But how? He finally managed, turning to Sarah. The cost of all this. Remember when I told you about my parents' inheritance? She squeezed his hand. They left it to me with one instruction, to use it to build a life that would make them proud. They believed that money was like water. Its true value lies in helping things grow. She gestured to the transformed farm around them. This is what I chose to grow. Martha stepped forward, holding a thick envelope. We all helped in our own ways. The whole town knew what Sarah was planning. Every time you saw strange trucks or mysterious meetings, we were all part of the miracle she was creating. Inside the envelope were photographs documenting the secret transformation. Workers installing equipment under cover of darkness, community members standing guard to prevent surprise visits, the gradual metamorphosis of the struggling farm into a model of sustainable agriculture. That's why everyone's been acting so strange, James said, realization dawning. All those knowing looks, the sudden changes of subject when I walked into the diner, hardest secret I ever had to keep, Martha admitted. Though watching you try to figure out why Sarah was asking so many farming questions was pretty entertaining. The tour continued around the property, each stop revealing another aspect of the farm's transformation. The old storage barn had been converted into a modern processing facility. New fencing gleamed in the sunlight, designed to last for decades. Even the farmhouse had been subtly upgraded with energy-efficient systems. There's one more thing, Sarah said as they completed the circuit. She handed James a final document, the organic certification approval. Your family's traditional farming methods meant the soil was already nearly qualified. With the new systems in place, we'll be able to command premium prices for everything we grow. James stared at the paper, then at his new wife, his eyes filled with tears. You didn't just save the farm, he said hoarsely. You saved my family's entire legacy. Everything my great-grandfather dreamed of. Everything my father worked for. No, Sarah corrected gently. I gave you the tools to save it yourself. Everything here is based on your knowledge, your dreams, your understanding of this land. I just found a way to make those dreams possible. And we all helped, called out a voice from the crowd, followed by laughter and applause. The wedding. Guests surrounded them, everyone now free to share their part in the grand surprise. The Henderson boys described installing solar panels by moonlight. The Anderson sisters told how they'd coordinated deliveries around James's schedule. Even old Mr. Peterson admitted to running interference when James had nearly discovered workers preparing the irrigation system. Pastor Roberts raised his hands for attention. I believe, he announced with a smile, this would be an appropriate time to introduce for the first time Mr. and Mrs. Miller, the owners of the most modern family farm in 3 counties. As cheers erupted around them, James knelt beside Sarah's wheelchair. I love you, he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. Not just for this miracle you've created, but for understanding exactly what this land means to me, for seeing not just what it was, but what it could be. Sarah touched his face gently. That's exactly how I feel about you, James Miller. Now are you ready to start our future together? More than ready, he replied, looking out over their transformed land. Though I have to warn you, I have absolutely no idea how to operate half of this equipment. Sarah laughed, the sound carrying across the fields they would now work together. Don't worry, farmer. I've got the instruction manuals right here in my chair. All we need now is the most important ingredient. And what's that? She pulled him close for their first kiss as husband and wife. Love, she whispered against his lips, and we've got plenty of that to grow on. The wedding reception flowed seamlessly into a celebration of the farm's rebirth. Guests wandered the property in amazement, led by Tom Anderson and his team of workers, who were finally free to explain every innovation they'd secretly installed. James moved through the crowds in a daze of joy, one hand always finding its way back to Sarah's, as though to anchor himself in this new reality. Emma's wedding cake, when finally unveiled, proved to be an architectural masterpiece. A detailed replica of the Miller farm, complete with tiny solar panels and a miniature greenhouse made of spun sugar. Seemed fitting, she said, beaming, at the newlyweds, to show both where you've been and where you're going. As evening approached, James and Sarah found a quiet moment alone by the old oak tree. The setting sun painted the modernized farm in shades of gold, the solar panels catching the last light like diamonds. In the greenhouse, automated systems hummed softly, nurturing the first crops of their new beginning. I keep thinking about my father, James said softly, his hand resting on Sarah's shoulder. How many nights he sat at the kitchen table, trying to figure out how to save this place. He would have loved you, you know. Not just for what you've done, but for how you did it, with respect for our history and hope for our future. Sarah covered his hand with hers. He did save the farm, James. He raised a son who loved this land enough to keep fighting for it, even when all hope seemed lost. That's why I knew this would work, because you never gave up, even when you had every reason to. From the reception tent came the sound of laughter and music, their community celebrating not just a wedding, but a resurrection. The first stars appeared above them, witnessing the birth of something rare and precious, a legacy not just preserved but transformed, a love story not just between two people, but between a family and their land, spanning generations past and those yet to come. Ready to dance with your bride? Sarah asked, her eyes twinkling. James smiled, remembering all their careful practices over the past months. Lead the way, Mrs. Miller. After all, he added with a grin, you seem to have a knack for leading me toward better things. The first weeks after the honeymoon established the rhythm of their new life together. Each morning, Sarah and James made their rounds of the farm, her wheelchair easily navigating the specially designed paths between the modern installations. She handled the computer systems and financial planning while he managed the practical, farming decisions, their different expertise combining to create something greater than either could have achieved alone. The greenhouse yielded its first harvest right on schedule, plump tomatoes and crisp lettuce that brought premium prices at the local farmers' market. News of the Miller farm's transformation spread through agricultural circles, bringing visitors from neighboring counties to see how tradition and innovation could work in harmony. Thank you cards went out to everyone who had helped make their miracle possible. Martha kept one pinned above the diner's coffee station. To the best conspiracy of love this town has ever seen. Thank you for helping us grow something wonderful. Love, James and Sarah Miller. But perhaps the most meaningful moment came one quiet evening when James found Sarah in the greenhouse, making notes in her ever-present journal. What are you planning now? He asked. Knowing that look in her eyes, she smiled up at him. Just adding another chapter to our story. After all, she added, patting her journal, someday our grandchildren might want to know how love can make miracles grow. The first year's profit statement arrived on a crisp autumn morning, confirming what they already knew. The Miller farm had transformed from a struggling legacy into a model of sustainable success. The organic certification had opened premium markets, while the greenhouse's year-round production provided steady income even in winter months. But it wasn't just about the numbers. James and Sarah had found their rhythm, her wheelchair moving confidently through the modernized barn as she managed deliveries while he tended the fields with renewed purpose. The solar panels quietly generated savings along with power, and the smart irrigation system preserved not just water, but precious time. Most evenings found them on the porch swing, planning next season's crops or reviewing system data on Sarah's tablet. Sometimes they simply sat in comfortable silence, watching the sunset paint the solar panels gold, both remembering that first evening when James had nervously invited her to dinner. "You know what Dad used to say," James mused one such evening. "A farm's not just about what you grow, it's about growing yourself." He squeezed Sarah's hand. He was right. We've all grown here, haven't we? The land, the crops, us. Sarah smiled, opening her journal to a fresh page. "And we're just getting started, farmer, just getting started." The new sign at the farm entrance read, "Miller and Wheeler Family Farm," its fresh paint gleaming in the morning sun. Below it, a smaller placard announced sustainable farming tours every Saturday, evidence of how their operation had become a beacon of hope for other struggling family farms in the region. Young farmers regularly sought their advice, drawn by stories of the farm's transformation. Sarah handled the business, consulting from her wheelchair-accessible office in the converted farmhouse, while James led tours of their integrated systems, explaining how traditional farming wisdom could work hand-in-hand with modern technology. Martha liked to tell visitors how the whole town had conspired to help love save a legacy. But the real miracle, she'd say, serving coffee to tour groups in the greenhouse's new cafe area, wasn't just saving the farm, it was showing us all what's possible when someone believes enough to make dreams come true. The old Miller family deed hung proudly in the greenhouse entrance, now accompanied by framed photos showing 4 generations of farmers. The latest edition showed James and Sarah by the solar panels, their matching smiles as bright as their future, proving that the best family traditions were the ones that could grow and change with time. 1 year to the day after their wedding, James and Sarah hosted a celebration beneath the same oak tree where they'd first shared their dreams. The greenhouse, now lush with year-round crops, provided fresh vegetables for the feast. Solar panels glinted above the renovated barn where local farmers gathered to share stories and strategies. Martha had outdone herself with an anniversary cake decorated to match their wedding day masterpiece, but with one addition, tiny fondant figures showing farm visitors learning from the Millers. "Because your love story didn't just save a farm," she explained, misty-eyed. "It's saving dozens of them now." Their first-year profits had exceeded even Sarah's careful projections. The organic certification commanded premium prices, while the greenhouse's steady production had created year-round jobs for local youth. The farm had become both a business success and a community cornerstone. James found Sarah by the greenhouse, making notes in her well-worn journal. "Still planning miracles?" he asked, touching her shoulder. She smiled up at him. "No need anymore. We're living one." On quiet evenings, James and Sarah still sat on their porch swing, watching the sun set behind the modernized greenhouse where their love story had been revealed. The farm hummed with gentle energy, solar panels tracking, the last rays of light, irrigation systems providing precise care to the crops, and the greenhouse nurturing tomorrow's harvest. Sarah's journal now held more than secret plans and hidden dreams. Its pages chronicled their success story, inspiring other farmers to find their own path between tradition and innovation. The Miller and Wheeler family farm had become more than just a successful business. It was living proof that love, determination, and community spirit could transform dreams into reality. "You know what I love most?" James said one evening, his hand finding Sarah's as naturally as breathing. "Not just that you saved the farm, but that you saw what it could become even before I dared to dream it." Sarah smiled, watching the stars emerge above their flourishing land. "That's what love does," she said softly. "It helps us see the best of what's possible in each other, and then gives us the courage to make it real."